in it. And okay, we got it.
Okay, we're live screen. Gene's frozen on my screen.
I'm not seeing the whole multi-window.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is my name is Jim Kidrick. I'm the president and CEO of the San Diego Air and Space Museum. Thanks for joining us this morning. By now, most of you know that the launch has been delayed. It looks like we'll see something more or hear something more about 1 o'clock this afternoon. However, we did ask for Jerry Griffin, Milt Windler, and Gene to join us. Gene is caught in a thunderstorm right now, and they're getting lightning in the immediate area. He was with us just a minute ago. We expect him to come back, but he says he's losing trees in his yard.
That would be Gene Kranz, by the way. You mentioned Gene. That'd be Gene Kranz, of course, who's out fighting the lightning in his neighborhood.
Yeah, per the information we already sent out. And the we have Mark Larson, the chairman of our board at the Air and Space Museum, helping me this morning. So we're going to talk for just a few minutes. It won't be a lengthy discussion. Jerry Griffin actually joins us from Texas A&M Stadium, right?
Right, Kyle Field.
Oh, excuse me. Okay.
It's jam-packed with 102,000 people in it.
Oh.
Wow.
Well, San Diego State's new stadium, only 35, I think it is. So, so way to go. Everything is bigger in Texas, and now we know it for sure. So what we wanted to do, because this is something that our three very special guests have encountered many times over their long history, through the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo programs. The three of them were virtually on every Apollo mission ever, every mission to the moon. They've seen scrub launches, they've seen all this kind of stuff. But maybe, Jerry, you could pass on just a couple comments on what the launch team is experiencing at this time.
Well, I'm for one thing, Jim, I'm sure they're all disappointed. You're right. The three of us have been through a lot of scrubs, going clear back to Mercury and clear through Apollo. And it's always, you got your adrenaline flowing, you're ready to go, and then you have to power down. And so it's always a little bit coming off the high. We did have a flight in shuttle that scrubbed 6 times before it got off. And I was center director by that time. I was out of mission control, but boy, it was frustrating. And this leak that they've identified is in a bad place. It's right at the inlet where they feed the fuel into the tank. And it is, it's got a big seal. It's a big pipe or a hose kind of thing. It's got a big seal, and they think that seal was leaking. And I understand that what they did was they shut the flow off and tried to let it warm up and then increase the flow, actually, to see if they could get the seal to set, but it didn't. So I think the big argument now, or not the argument, but what they're trying to discuss is, can they fix that at the pad? The vehicle is out on the pad. Access is not as easy on the pad to all these tight places where some of these things are. If they have to roll back the whole stack back to the vehicle assembly building, we're talking days of delay here. But they've got all the platforms and the way to get at things there if they have to replace that seal. So I think they're probably just trying to figure out right now, can we do this at the pad and fix it? And if we can, then there's an opportunity as early as Monday to go again. And I think we're seeing the fallout here of them. And it's a test, so you expect it. After a while in this business, you learn you're not going to always go when you want to, so you have to kind of be realistic about it. But they never could finish the wet dry run where they tank the whole vehicle and ran through the whole thing. They were going to try to do that before they rolled back the first time, and they just didn't get through it. So I think they're reaping the effect of that now to some degree, and so it's a tough situation for them. And I don't envy the guys at the Cape or the guys in Mission Control, it's frustrating.
Well, you know, in our first postponement, we talked about a lot of different scenarios, as you recall, and maybe you could also share a little bit of your experience, you know, through the Apollo, you know, some of the situations, Apollo 13, the Apollo 1, you know, the various things that occurred that are so similar to what we're experiencing right now.
Yeah, you know, we were getting ready to fly the first manned command module on Apollo 1 and had to fire. Had to power down for almost 2 years. We didn't fly anything. And we were very cautious when we got to that first flight, Apollo 7. But we also had some interim flights in there that were no crews aboard, no astronauts. And all of them had problems of one kind or another. In fact, we launched 7, and then and it worked fine in Earth orbit. Then we decided to go to the moon on 8, and 8 we had a manned test of the Saturn V, unmanned test of the Saturn V. It was very bad. In fact, lost an engine on the second stage. The third stage didn't restart, which was the stage that sent you to the moon. And then, by golly, the next Saturn V that launched, we went to the moon on Apollo 8. And I don't think they'll be quite that bold on this one. They're going to get this flight right before they put crew on board at all. And it's a brand new vehicle. It hasn't flown in this configuration. Parts of it, engines, solid rockets that were smaller, flew on the shuttle. But they're going to get this one right before they go to Artemis 2, which is a crew on board that goes in orbit around the moon. So it's gonna be a very careful call, I think they make here, and they're doing the right thing.
Well, hold on just a second, Mark. Because I want to touch upon this, and because this seems like the ultimate test flight. You're not just testing the equipment, you know, the hardware, the tech. You know, we used to joke and say, hey, you know, in my cell phone, I had more technology than Apollo did. But they're also really testing the mission control crew, the launch crew, the flight directors, you know, all of a sudden bringing this team together that hasn't been together for really a long time. We would have called them newbies. And tell me about that.
Yeah, it hasn't been together a long time to go deep space. And of course, there's a lot of shuttle flights, and 135 of those where mission control and the Cape were working very closely together. But as you and I have discussed before, Jim, going into deep space is a lot different. It has a different feel to it. And you're right. These teams have not been together and working together, and they're probably doing fine. The hardware is kind of letting them down here a little bit, but I think they'll be fine. But they haven't worked together. It's kind of like football teams that play that first game and they're making errors and offsides and all that kind of stuff. And you say, "What are you doing?" And but they'll be. I think the teams will be okay. But you're right; they have not been tested, and they're getting their baptism of fire right here.
And 42 days of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and trying to make
in San Diego. Yeah. So do you. A question back to your point about when you're talking equipment. That's why I wanted to jump on there a little bit earlier, Jim. When you talk about things like the seal that they have to fix, and maybe they got to go back to the VAB, and that could put it off till maybe, I think the launch window totally goes to like October 4th, then it runs into Artemis 2 plans. So that gets really complex. But when you say seals, and anybody paid attention to the shuttle, the 135 missions, or even some of them, that kind of harkens back to the disasters, unfortunately. You wonder, it reminds us how everything has to be safe. But there are some similarities, and I brought a prop. So, I mean, here you have the shuttle, and you flip around this way, it's remarkably similar in some ways to Artemis 1. And there are some shuttle parts on there. I mean, even down to what the engines they put under the main tank. So explain some of the
now Mark's frozen.
Yeah. Well, they froze up. Jerry, explain some of what the shuttle technology is that has been applied to this, and in some cases that
Hold up your model again with the
side of the other side.
turn it the other way. That orange tank is full of hydrogen and oxygen. It's a divided tank. Hydrogen in one end, oxygen in the other. It looks a lot like the core stage of the Artemis, and it is. It's very similar. It's got insulation on it because it's actually a giant thermos bottle trying to keep that stuff liquid. It's at minus 300 degrees to keep it liquid form. So the only difference is in the Artemis, there are 4 engines on the bottom of that structure. And it's those engines that the first one, our first scrub was the problem. And then you got to fill these tanks. And today the problem is that on the hydrogen side is where that inlet goes, that the hydrogen on the ground is pumped into that tank and it's leaking. Now the solid rockets on the side are very similar to those that are on Artemis. The only difference is these solid rockets that you're showing here came in 4 segments that had to be stacked. The ones for Artemis have 5 segments, but they're essentially the same kind of rocket. That's right. We're going to see this thing. We're going to see this thing lift off pretty fast. Not like the shuttle. It was painfully slow. This thing's going to leap off pretty fast. And then, of course, the other difference is up on top of that core stage, we have an upper stage, and we also have the Orion spacecraft. So a lot of similarities, a lot of technology. The engines that are, look in the back of the orbiter, there's 3 engines there. Those little engines.
There you go.
Yeah, there's the 3 engines in the back. That's the same engine that's in the core stage of Artemis. There's 4 of them instead of 3. There's 3 here.
And those are shuttle engines. Were they repurposed from shuttle? Were they waiting in the warehouse?
They were left over after shuttle, and they're using them.
Were those going to go on some of the canceled missions, or had they been flown before?
Say that again. You were black.
These engines, had they been on the shuttle engines that are into Artemis, were they new, or are they repurposed, or have they flown?
Well, I think there's one engine. I know for sure there's one engine. I know for 90% sure. One engine that's on this Artemis actually flew on a shuttle. It was redone, of course, refurbed, everything, all the pumps checked and all that kind of stuff. I think the other 3 engines were never used, and they've got about 26 of these they're going to use up. And then they're going to another engine. I think it's called an RL-10. These are or 525s or something. Anyway, I can't remember the number.
Was that a budgetary decision? Is that why it was done, to speed up the program?
No, it's just efficiency. We knew those engines were well known, and they have flown before. They have reflown before on the shuttle, so it's not new to recycle them. And they're very, very stable. We never had any problems with them.
Just one other question on the engine issue. The one that was involved in the countdown to eventually the scrubbed attempt number 1 this past Monday, because there was at one point an engine issue. Was it with that one from shuttle? The one that had been. I said no. I don't know. I don't think so. Yeah. That would have probably been noted, and if that had been the case, I suspect it would have been pointed out. But I don't know for sure. It was a single engine. And
well, let's take a welcome to Gene joining us. Gene, we told them that lightning was taking down all the trees in your yard. So thank you for getting back to us. And also, I just want to give a real quick shout out to Matt and his team up in Seattle at Museum of Flight who have joined us today. But Gene, maybe just give us a quick overview of your views of what's going on today, certainly into the future. And Jerry kind of started us off.
Well, I'm coming in cold now. Basically, we had a strike that basically generated an inductive load here. and our generator kicked in, so I had to reboot actually everything in the house. So I don't know how long it's going to last. So
Well,
excellent.
we'll stop the invasion. So anyway, Gene, if you could pass on a few of your comments about, certainly the importance of this flight, the importance of returning to the moon, some of the philosophies you operated under, as one of our Apollo flight directors, and having seen virtually everything that they could ever see, just some reviews of how important it is to get back to the moon into deep space.
Well, I think the first comments are that basically I got something in the background there.
I know I don't know where it's coming from.
That may be people near the closet at Texas A&M the football area is probably the cleaning crew wondering if
Did the Aggies score something?
No, halftime.
He's with the caterers. True.
I tell you what, I got lightning popping all over. So I'll tell you what, I think to secure my thing from another problem in the house, I think I might just shut down for the day.
Well, we don't want you to be hurt, so go protect Marta. And
well,
yeah.
she's fine, but basically it's all of the. I mean, they're really close by, and the generator cuts in and out, which is not a good signal. It thinks we restored electric power here, but no, actually, I think the scrub is really going to be picked up by the media as just another problem, et cetera. But this is the nature of new revolutionary high technology. And I think about it, everybody wants to look at Apollo. Well, Artemis is Apollo on steroids. It's probably the first step into the Jules Verne age of spaceflight. So we got a Virgin spacecraft, we got a Virgin booster, we got a Virgin team, and I'm actually surprised how smoothly it's worked to get 2 countdowns right now down to the point where basically, we got what appears to be a minor problem in the launch pad. But they're making the calls, and this is a growth period, a regrowth period for the people in the launch pad because they haven't done anything like this before. I remember in our old days, before we had the internet and all this kind of stuff, as a result of the recycle, they'd be faxing up all the deviations and the changes to the countdowns that we had. We'd spend the next several hours just getting the paperwork ready for the next launch attempt. And right now here, these guys are sturdy missile men and women out there. And it's really a pleasure to listen to them, watch them. I like their briefings. I think they've done a good job from that standpoint. I think the flight readiness review recap they did was very well done. Everybody picked their part. They tried to explain the deviations, the problems that caused the first scrub. Right now, I'm more concerned about the weather in the Atlantic right now than I am about whether they're going to solve their problem on the launch pad. I think they'll get that solved. But Jerry and I know, in fact, I was talking when we came up, the administrator went through 6 launch attempts, Nelson, and finally we got him off in the 7th. That was, I think, 61C, if I remember right.
Yeah.
And this is the nature of the business. We are working with large amounts of high energy, incredible reactants that they put in, the hydrogen, oxygen.
All the people that went to A&M
Oops,
right now.
you're still there.
Okay, I was just got a word from my wife. They got a weather delay at A&M now, apparently.
Oh, well, Jerry has more time. Hey,
Okay,
Gene,
so sounds like
Gene, before you head off to do lightning detail here, if they have to roll this back to the VAB, the assembly building, what kind of a delay? What's the soonest, considering how slow that is coming and going, and then the repair sequence? What would you estimate then if they decide that later this afternoon? What's the earliest there might be an opportunity again?
Well, I don't really know. I think they'd have to recycle to the next month's launch attempt. I think they'd be moving now into the September timeframe, and I think they got the launch windows twice a month generally. I don't know what they are for the
Yeah.
September timeframe, but
This says launch window closes for Artemis 1 October 4th. The window reopens October 17th. That's the latest I saw.
I think if they have to roll back, you're talking probably a minimum of 10 days. And of course, it could take longer if the fix takes longer. But you got a lot of work to do just to get you got to get the crawler back out there and go underneath and disconnect everything on the umbilical tower. It is a mess. And then you've got to pick it up and roll it back and put it back down on a stand inside the VAB. So I think you're talking 10 days minimum if you have to roll back. And because of the windows that you just pointed out, Mark, it may be later. And I don't know what those lenses are off the top of my head, and I think Gene had it, an estimate that, and if you get out to December, it's probably even a different time of launch and all that. The windows will look entirely different.
Right.
The Monday opportunity, if it were to come up Monday, is like 5 o'clock Eastern, 3 o'clock in the afternoon in California. And so it keeps getting later and later, and then you got to wait for daylight to come back around.
And then, of course, their ambitious schedule, you move it to Artemis 2 with an actual crew on board as opposed to the mannequins on Artemis 1, then everything gets pushed back, obviously. So this has been very ambitious, and this is what happens for safety, which is important, obviously crucial.
During our first discussions when we had the original postponement, we were talking about the stellar quarters that you had, Jerry and Gene. How nice they were, and that you would awaken in the morning, cup of coffee, look out. If you saw the lights, you went to work. If you didn't see the lights, some of the indicators of it seemed like the hotel knew whether or not you were going to launch more than anyone.
Jane talked about that in the Mercury days, and I was not quite there. I got there between Mercury and Gemini, but yeah, he said they would just go out and look at the launch pad, which was down the Cape a ways. And if the lights were on the launch pad, that meant they were still go. And they get up and get out there. And remember, this with 4 cell phones and all kinds of things. So it was pretty primitive. The thing I remember about the Cape, because we flew the first 2 unmanned uncrewed vehicles, and the first manned with Grissom and Young, Gemini 3 from the Cape. And I was there for all of those. And not only did we have a hotel on the beach, but we slept in bunks. It was like a barracks. All the flight controllers were inside this barracks. And it took me back to my military days and back here at A&M as well. And so it was a fun time, though. It was strictly grassroots, and we were learning so much and so fast. And these guys today at least have some of that experience that they didn't have to deal with, because they knew that vehicles could be launched. Vehicles can be launched to the moon. People can land on the moon and return. And at the time we were back in Mercury and Gemini, we were saying, holy moly, we got to do this in 10 years. We got to get people to the moon and back. And sure enough, we did. But with a 2-year setback because of the fire. So it was these guys are having, in spite of what you might think, these guys are having some fun and satisfaction on the ground, in all phases because they're learning. They're learning a lot so fast. And there is a satisfaction in that you feel more confident the next time you try it. And it's a risky business. It's a tough business. I think it was one of our leaders at the end of Apollo said, we made it look too easy. And the next people that try it, they're going to find out how hard it was. And so we're going through a little of that. I think it was very prophetic. It was Max Faget.
Well, and Gene, you mentioned the importance of Apollo 7. San Diego's own Wally Schirra commanded the mission, and Frank Borman leading the team to redesign the capsule. Tell us how important that mission was.
Well, actually, it was it was a confidence builder. We had gone through, we're now actually in the Block 2 spacecraft, and we had really the opportunity to grow as a result of the Apollo 1 fire. That fire really shook us up. And we had to restore what I'd say the belief in not only the mission team, the crews, the program offices, and everything else, that basically we were a team that was capable of reaching out and going to the moon. So that first mission, now we flew several unmanned missions, and we got, as Jerry talked, I think in the earlier session, some of the real interesting episodes we had with the second Saturn V that we flew, which sort of was flying loop-de-loops over there, and the trajectory team didn't know what the heck to do with it. And range safety, everybody was just watching that thing fly through the sky, and you watch it in the plot boards, and everybody was expecting somebody to expect range safety to blow the darn thing up, but that wasn't the case. But I'd like to go back to the earlier one. Actually, I'll go back to President Kennedy. At the time he made his speech, we choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things. 1 month prior to that speech, we had blown up our second Atlas rockets. The teams were still returning from that site. And when we were at the Cape, we didn't go back to basically the Langley. We just remained there and prepared for Alan Shepard's mission. And we got Alan Shepard off. And then about 7 to 10 days later, President Kennedy made that speech. And it was really a good indicator of the time when a president came aboard and issued a challenge right after we had blown up a rocket. We had a total of 20 minutes manned spaceflight. We'd never been to orbit, and we're going to the moon. And I think this is the same kind of mentality that I think the team's going to develop for the Artemis program. They've had struggles. They're probably going to be out to the pad maybe 3 or 4 more times, but eventually they're going to get that thing off, and it's all going to work. Now, that mission they got, I think, flying an extremely long duration mission for the first time, they're going to learn an awful lot of lessons in that, but that's good because they're going to gain all of their experience, not in simulations, but in real time. Making that rocket and making that spacecraft go through all of the events associated with a successful Artemis 1 mission. So I look at this thing here as a period of very intense learning. And literally, this gives the people the opportunity to go back, and they're going to debrief what they learned. Every time you count down, you learn something new. You find out what things you could have done better. You found out, hey, this was unnecessary. But basically, you're in the process of growing this new team. And I think maybe a second launch scrub is probably a good exercise for them to retain and regain and say, hey, we know what we're doing. We'll be back out on the launch pad and we'll get the job done.
That's the Gene Kranz we know.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're probably going to scrub today. And for lack of a better term, we thank each of you, and we're sorry Milt couldn't come on because he's experiencing a little bit of weather also. And we hope the Aggies do win the game, and the game continues certainly.
Thank you.
But
Help.
thank,
You're in a sheltered place. That's good, Jerry.
That's
Now
right.
it's
Yeah.
yeah, you're in the safest place there is.
At least I'm not outside.
That's
Well,
right.
thanks to each of you, and we'll come together again with your concurrence, and we'll do this. And I think you're right, Gene. We're just waiting to have a very successful launch. The team is coming together. It's wonderful to watch, but it's wonderful to also see it through your eyes and have you express it to us, as you do. I will give a lot of credit, and President Kennedy. It was very aggressive at the time, and no matter what politics someone might be, I give a lot of credit to the last administration for their belief that we should go to the moon again, and because it takes time. And we didn't talk about this. We'll talk about it, some other time more. The commercial space versus NASA, and the importance of having both of them is certainly proving very, very true. So.
And one other note, Jim. So at this point, because we don't know until we hear from NASA at the press conference in 3 or 4 hours, whatever, it's a possibility that something happens on Monday, as Jerry Griffin mentioned earlier. But if not then maybe a long wait. But safety first.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
And-
gang, the storm
Okay,
is
gang.
secured here. I'm going downstairs, make sure the generator is all shut down properly. So basically, I have my recycle plan
Down
Well,
to the
starting
bunker.
right now.
Well, and
Yeah, I'm going to roll back. I'm rolling back.
and to the two Air Force guys,